Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. Hjálmar Gíslason, CEO of Grid. Welcome, Hjálmar.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. We were just sort of discussing, but how was on the pronunciation of your name?
Yeah, so Hjálmar Gíslason. You were pretty close.
And where's the name coming from? Where are you based?
So the name is Icelandic. That's where I'm from, and that's where I'm based at the moment, and that's where the Grid team is, and where we're building out our business from.
And I also understand, given that you're in Iceland, there's impending volcanic eruptions coming soon.
Yeah, so they say. So we've been watching developments there. The Earth has been shaking quite a bit for the last 2 weeks or so, and the scientists are looking closely at it. From what we hear, the magma is kind of breaking up through the ground about 15 to 20 kilometers out of town. But nothing that should be that anybody should be in danger from it. Not even infrastructure in the area. So we should be good.
I heard, was it something like 15 to 20,000 earthquakes, or does that feel a bit too high?
No, I think that was last week. So I think we're up to almost 40,000 now. So I woke up twice last night alone from fairly big earthquakes. So, but it's funny, you even get used to that. I mean, this being a volcanic island, we've felt a few earthquakes in our lives, but I've felt more in the last 2 weeks than I've felt in my entire lifetime before.
Well, certainly 40,000 in a couple of weeks is a lot, but I guess perhaps you start to ignore them if they're coming across so frequently.
Incredibly, yes. You seem to be able to get used to pretty much everything.
And so tell us a little bit. We've spoken about volcanoes and earthquakes, but let's speak a little bit about yourself. And yeah, I mean, who is Hjálmar Gíslason?
Yeah, so I'm actually raised in the countryside here in Iceland. So I grew up on a farm, but my dad was the computer guy at the agricultural university in the area. So I grew up around computers and with computers in my life from day one. Started programming at a very early age and kind of gravitated towards that relatively quickly, and then as kind of, as I became a teenager, programmed a few computer games, managed to sell a couple of copies of some of them and so on, and kind of that kind of got me. So I've been starting companies more or less my whole life. Grid is my 5th as a founder, and they've kind of, in the last 12 years or so, I've been kind of exclusively working in the data and analytics space. And that's what we are kind of taking on with Grid today. So went from I still love the countryside and the outdoors and try to go there as much as possible. But computers and kind of software and building companies has become my life.
If you don't know, this is your 5th company as a founder. I mean, amazing. I think often I guess it depends on the founder journey. But I mean, certainly this is my first, and sometimes I feel like, after this one is done, I wouldn't do a second or a third, but you never know. Maybe you get that itch at some point. And there are a few people that I know that have, founded 5 companies and so on. If you don't mind me asking, how many were successful? How many were not successful out of the 5?
Yep, that's a fair question. So actually, none of them has gone entirely belly up, but you could say that one was a failure for sure. That was my second one. We were building that out in the .com days, and took on way too much funding, hired way too many people, and kind of just basically ran way too fast and ran into the ground at a relatively fast pace. That would be the kind of only one that I would consider a failure. But the first 3 were, the first one and the third one were fairly small. I exited both of them actually, and kind of with a decent outcome for myself, but very small. So I think that you can say that the 4th company called Data Market that I started back in 2008, that was then acquired by BA company Click in 2014 at a price of $15 million after kind of taking in about $2 million in funding. was the first kind of really significant exit. And now here we are at at least 2.5 years into the journey with Grid, and this is by far the kind of the biggest foundation, or kind of we could call it the biggest foundation I've stood on so far in my life as a founder.
What is it then about you that makes you want to do this for the 5th time, and not, I don't know, take it easy or go back to the countryside and I don't know, chill out?
Yeah, no, so I get a lot of joy out of seeing my ideas come to life. That is basically my drive in life, and this is a way to do that. I've also I've learned a lot from the couple of stints I've done working from others that have in both cases actually been working for an acquirer of my own company. But I don't particularly enjoy kind of big company life or the corporate life. So this just, I guess if you go by the kind of 10,000 hour rule, this is the one that I've spent the most time on, and hopefully I'm kind of getting better at it with time. So it just there's a lot of pull to it. There are so many things to like about starting companies. There are obviously a lot of hard things as well. And maybe the thing that has surprised me the most is that, whereas if I look back, 20 plus years when I was starting my first one, where it was just, 4 techies together in a very small room, coding more or less 24 hours a day, to today where we currently have 25 people here at Grid. And I take a lot of, pride and joy in, bringing people together and kind of just the people management side of it, kind of empowering the team and kind of making sure that everybody's aligned on the vision and where we're going, and, figuring out the best ways of working together, which are constantly changing as you grow and so on. So that part of it is new in some ways, and kind of, at least, it's a new thing I enjoy. And maybe that's actually what kind of makes it so fun, is that even though you are, even as the CEO and founder of the same company, you may have the same title of the same company, but your job changes every few months anyway, because you're taking on different things at the different parts of the journey.
Yeah, 100% agree. You mentioned there 25 people. Can you share any other kind of data, like how much you've raised, if you've raised, anything around sort of, growth and revenue and so on?
Yeah. So we are, like I said before, we're 2.5 years into the journey, and actually just about to launch our product commercially in about 2 weeks. We've taken in total $15.5 million, and that the latest one being a $12 million Series A that was led by NEA out of the US. Great investors, and we've had kind of, we've been very lucky with the investors and shareholders we've gotten on board so far. Anywhere from the angel round, which was pretty distributed, but we got a lot of people in that round that I had worked with before, and I knew would kind of bring value to it in addition to the money. Well connected in the space, and lots of good advice. To then the seed round that we did in early 2019, led by Blue Yard out of Berlin, and then now the Series A. So we have, like I said, raised in total. Actually, it's 16.5. Sorry, not 15.5. And we've been drawing on that to kind of build the initial version of the product. We've been in beta for about a year now, and learned obviously a lot from that. And now we are ready for prime time.
Awesome. And so let's talk about, like, I guess a little bit, why you founded it. What is the problem that Grid is solving? And then why is it that, let's say, obviously it's not necessarily typical, but it happens obviously in this case, that you raise a lot of money in Series A before the commercial launch. So what is it about, like, why big investors like NEA are coming in and they're excited about this product? So if you can perhaps answer those 2 questions. So why found it? What's the problem? Why are the investors getting excited about this?
Yeah. So Grid is basically, we set out to rethink the ways ordinary people, just everyday business people work with data and numbers. And that is a journey that has to start with spreadsheets, because that's where kind of people are working with data and numbers today. If anybody has to do anything with data, the first thing they fire up is the spreadsheet, and they start collecting small databases, building models, doing analysis, and even kind of building small business processes using spreadsheets. Where this comes from is that I mentioned before, I started a company called Data Market in 2008. Data Market was an early data as a service company, and what we were doing was essentially aggregating data from all sorts of public and private data sources of mainly quantitative information. So, the local census bureaus and statistics offices and the UN and World Bank, and basically any provider of socioeconomic and similar data. Data Market was then acquired by BI company Click in 2014. And one of the things that I realized, very soon after joining Click is here I am at kind of one of the companies that is leading the self-service revolution on the kind of BI and analytics side, together with Tableau and Power BI. And I believe these three are still kind of the three leaders in that space. And these are supposed to be, or are, some of the more approachable tools in that space, but they're still power user tools. There are a few people in every organization that really learn how to use them and utilize them, and they become the go-to people servicing maybe 10 to 50 other people within the organization when it comes to anything that has to be done with data. And then, so it isn't kind of quite as it isn't quite as self-service or widespread as you would like it to be. Then when you look at what everybody else is doing, they're just using their spreadsheets. And I just felt that there's a gap here between kind of the spreadsheet users that are taking care of a lot of their everyday needs when it comes to data and even kind of simple IT tasks using spreadsheets, and then these power user tools that we're looking at here, be it kind of BI tools in that space or kind of database tools somewhere else and so on. So what if we could bring a tool that would allow people to use their existing spreadsheet skills, even their existing spreadsheets and workflows, but do something more with that? So Grid is essentially a tool for anyone that has pulled together data or built a model in a spreadsheet, and now there comes a time that you have to present that to someone else. And that is something that the spreadsheet isn't terribly well built to do. So at the same time, only 12% of people say that they built their spreadsheets mainly for themselves. So, the inverse of that would be that 88% of them are kind of faced with this regularly. And that's when you start either kind of, either emailing around a spreadsheet with, the loss of control that you get, and kind of often a lot of work that goes into preparing the spreadsheet before you're ready to email it out, or kind of copy pasting of stuff from spreadsheets into PowerPoints and PDFs for distribution and for the narrative and for control over how people consume it. So we are essentially stepping into that and saying, oh, that doesn't make any sense. This is the when you are distributing spreadsheets in this way, they're not mobile friendly. You are not in control over the distribution. You have very little control over the narrative and how people are consuming the data. And these things are kind of tedious to do and tedious to make, and let alone kind of keep them up to date as kind of new data comes in, and you have to build for new scenarios and so on. So we essentially built a solution, a web-based solution that plugs on top of existing spreadsheets, be that Excel or Google Sheets, and then allows you to build beautiful interactive web pages on top of that, and put a narrative around that, and then share that out to the audience that you want to disseminate that with. The bigger reason, and kind of in some ways, this is already addressing a big issue for spreadsheet users, but because you asked kind of what is it that the investors see in this, is that there is an even bigger kind of problem out there, which is you probably seen kind of, because the spreadsheet is the go-to tool for so many tasks within the organization. It also means that every single organization has what I like to call kind of a spreadsheet fabric. So there's a lot of spreadsheets lying on people's local computers or out on their cloud services or wherever. Nobody knows exactly where they are, who has access to them, what they do, but they do run the business. And I would go as far as saying there's probably more proprietary data and business logic in spreadsheets than there is in the formal IT systems like the CRM and the ERP systems and so on. And if that's true, or if it's even remotely true, then that may actually be one of the bigger opportunities in kind of business software, to try to help organizations kind of get a little bit better view and hold on that, without taking away the power that the end users get from being able to serve themselves without having to go to IT or wait for the BI department or whomever for the tasks that they can take care of themselves using spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of nodding along there. Certainly, I know the feeling, but maybe also the pain of, pretty much every department within the business running a lot of their department on a spreadsheet, when we do have, other tools and so on, and then all these kind of silos, I guess, of data and information and thinking of better ways of doing that. So very interesting to see, obviously, how Grid can solve that problem, which I think is one, as you say, like pretty much every business has, which then, as you say, leads into how the investors can get excited about a big problem and a big market for that problem. How did NEA, for instance, how did this deal happen? How did they find you? Did you reach out to the investor, or did they get a tip off about something, great founders in Iceland working on a really big problem? How did that come about?
So as for them in particular, we got introduced to them by another VC fund that we had been talking to. But this was a process that we went into very deliberately. So we were going to raise a Series A, and kind of went out starting to prepare that in early 2020. Had pretty good data early on from kind of the early beta that we had. We knew this was, we're obviously pre-revenue, but at the same time had a lot of proof points and a really big problem and market to kind of talk about, and some proof points that we actually had something that might fly in that market. So we felt we were in a fairly good situation there. Started kind of preparing the materials and setting up some of the kind of meetings to start meet with investors, and actually pulled together a fairly long list of those to reach out to. And then, funnily enough, I was literally about to fly to San Francisco on the weekend that the US closed down. So I had lined up, I think, about a dozen meetings or so in San Francisco to talk to some of the West Coast VCs. And then all of a sudden, like, that doesn't happen. However, many of them had actually already said that they would rather do it on Zoom. So it wouldn't have made any sense to fly over there and kind of, meet with them over Zoom from a hotel room in California. So I just kind of shifted my day around a little bit and did all the meetings from here. All but one actually kept the meeting, but as you can imagine, those meetings were mostly about COVID and what it means for fundraising and what it means for the world and so on. We weren't too sure about what would happen there. But then, as we've all seen in 2020, it actually turned out that the VC market or the capital markets and VC included has been more lively than maybe ever before. It was just different, and we were so early in this process that it was actually kind of the process was, for many of the VC funds, we were the first company that they took through the hoops in this kind of new era. So all in all, I think we had about 110 funds listed where we had some connections, or we knew that they might be interested in something like this. Ended up talking to about 70 of them, and by talking to, I mean have at least a half-an-hour call with them. And then this is a sales process. So some of them are just you figure out on the first call they're not a fit. Either they're not investing in this stage, or they're not don't have an appetite for this type of deal or something like that. For others, kind of it takes you further, and you work this a little bit like a sales process, where you can think about these 110 as leads, then you qualify them, you take them through the stages, and it's not that different from kind of any other sales process, maybe on the more enterprisey end of the spectrum. The good thing in many ways is that when you have a lead investor, so basically as soon as you've sold one then it's the deal is more or less done. You don't have to sell more. My experience, both in this case and in many others, is that actually once you have a lead, and especially if you have a strong lead, then the rest of it is relatively easy and straightforward. But it was, this is a roller coaster for sure. Most of the funds you talk to end up saying no for one reason or another. Some of them some of them aren't, like we talked about before, aren't a match. Some of them don't believe in what you're doing. Some of them you don't believe the market is big enough or that you can pull it off. And especially at this kind of early stage, you have to be ready to go from one meeting where, one disappointing meeting to kind of meeting somebody for the first time immediately. When you leave that meeting, and you have to be ready to be energized and talk about things in a lively fashion again. So it's emotionally draining in many ways. But all of the good funds, and actually most people in the space are in it for all the right reasons. So you learn a lot from every single call. You probably learn most from the people that take you through the process a little bit and then decline, because they've really given it a thought and they have reasons for turning you down or for not doing it, and you listen to that, you learn, you adapt, and so on. The NEA in particular, we'd been in the process for a few weeks when we first got in touch with them, and that actually happened, like I said before, through an introduction from another VC fund, a European fund that didn't invest just simply on principle, didn't invest in pre-revenue companies. But they had connections into NEA and said, hey, we're not going to do this, but I know this guy here at NEA, and I think they might be interested. And had a call with them, got along with the associates that we started talking with right away, super smart people. They brought in a partner. That partner was actually an early investor in Tableau back in 2003 or 4. I think he pattern matched a little bit, kind of saw some of the same things in us as he saw in Tableau back then. It actually went really fast. I think it was 5 weeks from the first call until we had the term sheet signed. And then, legal takes a little while after that and so on, but we got it closed last summer, and, super happy about that. And, fantastic partners in NEA in every way.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, great name to have on board. So congrats on that, and so being one of the first, or certainly for NEA to be a virtual investment, or the Zoom investment. I recollect that obviously when Europe or the world was going through that first wave of COVID, and we pivoted to doing online conferences and speaking to the VCs that were participating. A lot of them saying that, well, look, we don't believe that we'll be investing, over Zoom without meeting the founder. And
right.
Then very shortly afterwards, they were making their first investments. And then I'm hearing from a few to saying, well, look, actually, this is so much more efficient that we're not necessarily sure if it will, go back to that way. But that's only anecdotal from a few VCs that we're speaking to. But I think certainly in some ways it has improved the efficiencies, as you said, for yourself. You didn't have to fly to San Francisco and be out of the office for a week and do all these kind of various trips and so on. But there are also there are different benefits from meeting in person as well, which also a lot of us I think miss, quite frankly.
Absolutely, and there were some funny because the funds were they were new at this as well, so they were trying to come up with all sorts of innovative things to make up for it. Let's do a coffee where we don't talk about business, we just get to know each other. And I think there was I think one of them actually proposed that we would do a dinner together, but the time zone difference was pretty high, and we thought ended up thinking it would be a little bit awkward, so we found other ways to to get that type of connection going. But I still think that when we can, I doubt that a lot of things will get closed unless people meet in person, or at least not to the degree that happened last year and is still happening, just because there is still a benefit to look somebody in the eye and kind of spend some time with them, have a meal with them, and so on. But certainly, kind of the earlier stages, I think will continue to be largely virtual, and that's beneficial for everyone. There's just more coverage as well. I mean, one thing I think we saw, it was already happening, but we saw more and more US VCs looking at Europe. And I think that last year the playing field was leveled a lot more, because it didn't really matter whether you were on a Zoom call with somebody in Europe or somebody somewhere else in California for the West Coast VCs.
A couple of questions. So you mentioned you're soon to be going into your commercial launch, right? So why, I guess question one, why be in beta for such a long period then, rather than do a kind of a lean kind of process and get an MVP out and so on? I mean, I guess, is it the complexity of the problem, or what? I guess I'll let you answer. Why be in beta for so long? And then now you're going to the commercial launch. What is that launch plan? What does 2021 kind of look like to get this product in the hands of the world, of the people that are having these problems, like businesses like mine?
Yeah. So on the first part there, kind of why so long? So in some ways, I think we've actually been, even before we started writing a line of code, we've been doing a lot of experimentation. So we've been very experimental, and we've made sure that we've gotten this into the hands of potential users, even from before the first line of code was written. However, there are essentially three hard problems that we had to solve from the technology standpoint and make sure that we were getting them right in order to fulfill our mission. The first one is we've actually built our own spreadsheet engine. It's an Excel compatible engine, meaning that you can take your existing Excel and to the degree that they are compatible Google Sheets models, and you can run them in our engine. However, this is an engine that runs entirely in the browser, which allows for super fast interaction and allows us to deliver an experience that people have generally not seen on top of their spreadsheets before. And that was pretty key to what we wanted to do, because with the spreadsheet engine, we can also expand on that. We can kind of do things. When we control the engine, we can add things onto it that other engines are not doing. Spreadsheet engines are fairly complicated things. So I like to say, there's actually real computer science involved in kind of what we're doing, that getting that right was one problem to solve. Number two, we are aiming at at the everyday business user. So getting the user experience right, so that people feel familiar in the product, coming from products like the Office Suite or some of the kind of more consumer-like online products was absolutely key to this. It's a pretty powerful editor that we built to allow people to build web documents on top of the spreadsheets that they have already put together. Editors are hard. They're hard to build and hard to get right. And they're actually not hard to get working, but they're really hard to get kind of so that you kind of get the feeling right. So it just feels like everything is doing the right thing for you. And probably the most development time has actually gone into getting that part right. The third part then was to solve for the fact that we are building a solution that lies on top of existing spreadsheets, and a lot of those spreadsheets are already stored in the cloud. You can use Grid if you can just upload things from your computer, but then you may have to re-upload and kind of resynchronize the data. But if you have it in the cloud, we seamlessly synchronize with the underlying data. So getting the integrations right with with OneDrive, with Google Sheets, and actually with Dropbox as well, if you're storing your files there, was also quite a lot of work, but feels absolutely magical. You can be working on a Grid document on top of a spreadsheet, and then if somebody makes a change to the underlying data, the data just pops up in front of you, whether you are the author authoring it or somebody in the audience actually looking at the data. So the latest data will just be available there quite magically, which is, it's sometimes funny when you're editing. You're not used to editing things on your local computer, and that then just having effect on something that lives on the web. But absolutely key to the experience we're trying to deliver here.
Amazing. And in terms of the launch kind of this year, the first things that you're going to do in terms of getting to market, What is it? What is the plan?
Yeah, so we are we are going to market in with a freemium model. Everything that the Grid is already in open beta, so everything that people see in the free version today will remain free, but we're adding some premium features. We're essentially there are two main areas that we're focusing on there. Number one is giving people a better way of seeing how their documents are being used. So who is viewing them, what are some of the assumptions that people are making kind of when they're interacting with the models that they've created and so on. And the second one is embedding. And that's actually where I think, and where we're seeing some of the early traction, is that people can bring in a spreadsheet model that they've already built, use Grid to build a UI on top of that, and then take that and embed that into their own web pages, or into their PowerPoints, or into their internal wikis, Confluence or Notion or whatever you have. And that is something that there simply is no other way to do that. So today, if you want to build an embedded calculator, for example, you either have to build it in from scratch in fairly basic tools that are available online, or you have to hire a web agency to recode something that you already have as a spreadsheet, but in JavaScript and kind of with web development tools to actually kind of create that. And it's easily $10,000 or more to just create a simple calculator. We are seeing kind of people with Grid, a skin doctor in Singapore that just comes in, already has like a diagnostic model, goes in the first hour, he's already building kind of a diagnostic tool and then embedding that in the website of his clinic. There's absolutely no other way that that type of person would be able to do something on their own without a lot, or and without a lot of cost.
And so like these are so you've got the freedom model, the embedded sort of model for I guess users to adopt. How are you going to acquire those customers? Like, how are they going to find you? Is it kind of word of mouth? Is it we've got a product-led growth strategy using content, paid ads, or so on?
Yeah, well, the good thing about Grid is that the reason you want to make a Grid document is that you want to show it to someone else. So you take your spreadsheet, you build a Grid document on top of it because you are communicating it. So there's already kind of a little bit of that built into the product that if you are a user, you will be exposing others to the product as well. And people say that there are two things that are needed for a product-led growth strategy. One is that yes, there is inherently something in the product that makes users show it to or introduce it to others. And secondly, that there is a big market. And talking about big markets, there aren't a lot of markets bigger than the spreadsheet market, with about 1 billion users of spreadsheets in the world already. So we're going for product-led growth for this initial stage, where a lot of it happens through self-service. We're obviously relying on tools like online marketing, search engine optimization, and marketing as well. But more to kind of seed the flywheel. We're already seeing and kind of trying to optimize, obviously, for the behaviors that will multiply. That will put a multiplier on all of the top of funnel work that we do. We are so self-service, product-led growth to begin with, and then this year, in many ways, we're actually more focused on building usage and building kind of the user base than on the revenue number, even though we have some modest expectations on that front for this year as well. But we're also going to be building out more team features in the product, thinking more about, okay, what does it actually look like if you're a part of a team, one of those teams that you mentioned, one of these departments that are largely driven by spreadsheets. How are people sharing them? Who is editing them? What are some of the workflows, and how can we facilitate some of those? And as we step into that space, we'll probably kind of start moving up the ladder a little bit from entirely, relying on self-service and product-led growth to inside sales at least. And then, eventually, to take on the really big opportunity that I mentioned in the beginning, where we start to try to kind of maybe reconcile some of the friction between the people at the edge of the enterprise that are getting stuff done in spreadsheets, and then the central functions like IT and management and auditing and so on that don't like the spreadsheet at all. That will become a proper enterprise product with enterprise sales, whatever enterprise sales actually looks like in the post-COVID world.
Awesome. Well, two final questions. One, as a CEO or a 5-time founder, it likely gets easier. I think, as you kind of intimated at the beginning, because you're getting better. You're putting the 10,000 hours in, and becoming the outlier or the expert. But it's still never that easy, right? Building, growing a business, being a CEO. How do you stay healthy and sane? To put in the effort and the hours and overcome the problems. What is your way of staying healthy and sane as a CEO of a company?
Yeah, so I actually, this definitely comes back to what I mentioned. Like when I was 20, we were just coding 24/7, and now I think actually great for for a company at its age and its size. I think we're pretty good overall with just work-life balance. People are working hard, but they aren't necessarily working long hours, and we are making sure that we're organized enough and aligned well enough to get stuff done without that having to take up all of our time. And that's the only sustainable way, really. As for myself, I like to run. I play basketball. I'm lucky enough to we actually have been able to play basketball in Iceland for 2 months now after COVID. So that's good. I also make sure that I take time off. I actually often find that you want to put in the hours, and you often end up doing putting in some hours on the weekends and so on, and obviously usually do. But I sometimes find that the best ideas and the kind of real solutions come if you really take the time off and kind of take your mind off work for a little bit, and then when you come back to it, it's like both the priorities are easier to discern, but also they're easier to solve.
100% on that. I mean, certainly I'm one that probably doesn't take enough time off, but I do notice that my good ideas come when I'm like walking the dog in the morning before work, and they're not often when I'm at work, because then you're kind of often like overwhelmed by the things that you kind of need to do. So it's kind of when you get that, I don't know, that mental quiet or whatever, it's when the good ideas come up. So definitely good advice there. Where can the listeners get their hands on Grid? Is it, I mean, as you said, it's coming available soon. Is it ready now? If people are interested, where can they sign up?
Yeah, so we are in open beta, so you can go to grid.is, that's grid.is, already today and sign up. The premium features I mentioned will be coming live on March 23rd, and that's the official commercial launch. And then we have a lot of stuff on the shelves ready to be released in the coming few months. So yeah, it should be a very interesting year ahead for us.
Amazing, exciting times. Well, Hjálmar Gíslason, CEO of Grid, thanks so much for being such a fascinating guest. Really excited to see the product and track your progress. Fingers crossed you're the next Tableau, Click, or more. So best of luck with that. We'll be watching.
Thank you, Alex.